Hello from Bangkok. This is the podcast Pigeon of Peace where we do discuss awesome skills of troubleshooters. Watch, listen, and check the description below for the details. Let's talk about scientific fraud and let's start with the definition.
Sometimes we read articles or even book with fancy idea, and it is very good to believe in it. But after some weeks or months or even years, suddenly we will have like discovery that this was scientific fraud. And at this point, it is very sad to know this. I will remind you such a case. It was a very famous Chinese mathematician who was working for Harvard, and suddenly he published an article how to solve a very famous unsolvable mathematical problem. And it was a huge discussion in the scientific magazine. Is he able or capable to do such research? And suddenly another scientist write a small essay that some part of this article was stolen from Russian mathematician Perelman, and it was like complete disaster. Before this review, this Chinese man was very famous in China because he was so proud to work for Harvard, and he was not a local, and he solved a very famous problem. But suddenly he was accused in stealing scientific ideas, and this is kind of scientific fraud. And his career was completely broken at once, immediately.
And when we actually speak about the skill or maybe ability to recognize it, I do believe, and again, like this is something that I also started like maybe doing recently more or less as an amateur, of course, is more like a fact checking. Because what I realized, let's say when we speak about big guys like a companies or whatever, they would try to bend the truth or maybe give it like a different angle to prove the point. So how to go about this one? Because at a certain point of time, you do want to just, like trust someone who just, like tell things. But when you use something that actually like could really damage your health or the health of your significant others, it's actually start getting really scary. How to go about this? And again, like I do know it's a general question, hence I do expect more or less general answer, then I will add more detail.
Let's remember another case. It was like 1 year ago. One scientific guy from South Korea was co-author. It's okay to say co-author.
Co-author, yes.
Co-author of an article with 3 or 4 guys from different universities, and they were talking about, I don't know how to say, суперпроводимость, I don't know how to say.
Superconduction.
Superconduction, yes, thank you. And it was a very loud name of this article. Superconduction could be achieved at usual temperature. And it was like a bomb in scientific world. A lot of people were trying to reconstruct the experiment, but no one succeeded. And it was a loud rumor that maybe there are some errors. And the 3 co-authors of this South Korean guy, they refused to stay in same article, and the magazine who published it also отозвал.
Call back or revoke.
Revoke this article, and this was quite an unusual case. Sometimes it's happened. For example, I read Lancet, this for medicine, and sometimes they write something. Now we could repair tooth damaged by caries, plaque, like by plaque. And when I was showing to academician in Moscow, they were laughing. No, this is error. This method could not repair tooth. And suddenly, after several months, it was like опровержение.
Controversion.
It was like controversion. And it's a very huge work for scientific people to revoke it. How it works? For example, I write an article, and you will make a controversion. And if you are right, my article should be crossed out from all the magazines, even in historiography. And also, if some people will rely upon my article in scientific researches as dissertation or article, they also should cross it out even after 10 or 12 years. So in this case, you should reprint your article without mentioning of this scientific fraud point.
And when we actually speak about, like checking all of the details, making sure that you are right, because let's say we come from the genuine point of view where we do believe that, like we do really want to find the truth, or we do want to figure out how the things really are. If we put ourselves on the fact checker place, so how they would go about, checking all of the items, how they do like the cross-checking or cross references when they try to see like whether this material that they were giving is real or not.
Let me remind another case. It was like 5 years ago, and in School of Troubleshooters, there are several stagiaires.
Interns.
Several interns, thank you. And one of them was a guy from Moscow State University, and he was obliged to make a lecture about bad habits, and he was collecting information. And he was quite a capable person, and it was a rehearsal of his lecture. And suddenly he tells me something like, people who drink vodka, they more often would be, I don't know how to say, их чаще обкрадывают.
They get their items stolen more often.
Yes, they get their items stolen more often than other people. And ask him, how do you know this? Can you please prove? And he says, okay, I will make fact checking and I will return back. And there were some also dispute items.
Dispute arguable.
Arguable items. Yes, thank you. And after he returned, it was an article something like this. If people drink, they will be not attentive. If they not attentive, their belongings could be stolen. And I asked him, yes, okay, you're good guy that you make a fact checking, but now you see that sometimes journalists or some people who write on articles, they will искажать.
Bend.
They will bend information, and it will completely lose the sense of meaning of previous author.
And well, actually, you touched on a good point, because sometimes there also might be, like the person. And I do remember from one of the recent skills, you mentioned that in a project, you mentioned there are like a hard people and soft people. So let's say, like hard people who just there is a hard person who might be probably, like creating something, but it's really arguable. It's like a soft. It's not really tangible. But then from the recipient side, there are soft people who actually tend to believe something, and like they just like buy the things as they are. So if we on the side of the recipient and we've been introduced with some of the facts, etc., so how do we go about it? Like, do we trust blindly, or we do like some sort of like a checklist and make sure that, okay, whatever was introduced is really something that we could leave through, or something that we could really use?
Scientific fraud, that is a skill which was included in extended program of School of Troubleshooters, just to show pupils that sometimes scientifics are not right. Okay, we are quite could be agree that some priest would bend information, maybe some philosophician would bend information, but we never expect this from scientific people, because scientific way of thinking is how to describe experiment that everyone could remake it and to get in compatible conditions the same results. But sometimes it's happen, and sometimes even very famous scientific, they will make some errors and mistakes in calculation, in thinking, and so on. For example, do you know that some of very famous scientific like Newton, like Albert Einstein, and some other, at the first point of their career, they were like a rocket of a new era of the science, because they they offer some new laws for our universe, but after they get the throne of people who are quite capable in science, they became like I don't know how to say, как дедовщина, like an...
Well, it's like a power of authority.
like power of authority. And if another new scientific ideas will approach to Newton or Einstein, they will say, oh, come on, this is nonsense and this is bullshit and we will never see it again. And so they became like a breaks of the progress from scientific point of view. By the way, several weeks ago, I read an article from one of my colleague. We were all together teaching in America, and he sent me an article that there is an error was found in translation of Newton law. And you know, it was so funny. Newton was living so many years ago, and all of this time, the scientifics were a bit shy to tell some of his laws because it was not completely the correct sentence. And suddenly one translator found that this was error. Newton was writing on Latin language, and after translation to English, it was a small correction of the meaning, and Newton was completely right. But all of this time, scientific world was trying to say, oh, maybe Newton was not writing correctly, but his meaning was correct. This first example. And second, I was asked several years ago, I was on one conference about physics, and I was asked by a group of people, what do I think about theory of Einstein? And I was trying to explain this very hard theory, hard to understand, but we should know that before we have a world made by Aristotle, then it was the world of Newton, and after it was the world of Einstein, and it was goes smoothly. And suddenly one scientific person asked me a very direct and very dangerous question. Is Einstein a great scientific or this is a great brand? And I answer, yes, it's a great brand, because if you will see the theory of относительности, theory of relativity. Thank you, theory of relativity, we will find that there are three points which is base of this theory, and two of these points are quite шаткие.
Not sustainable.
Not sustainable, thank you. So if you believe in these points, you will have a quite a good theory. But if you will doubt two of these 3 points, it would be no theory at all. At this point, I think that Einstein is quite a brand. And American people, as often happens, they think that they have a very good dollar, they have a very good scientist, but sometimes it would be revoked, and everyone will say that at first point, Einstein is not so great person as it was described for us. And second, some people were telling much more progressive way how to describe the same theme.
Well, don't create your own idol and don't worship them. And my next question will be, it's more on a personal level, I would say. But when we speak about the scientific road, what I kind of noticed, and it will be like a slightly turn into different direction in all like a Soviet movies, all of the kids, all of the, parents, they were such, I would say, educated. The level of thought was deep. Again and again, it's from the movies, obviously, it was directed, etc., but it might be reflecting more or less the environment. So when people seeing something at certain point of time, they just accept, but maybe with a certain level of education, they might be doubting something, not because of the fact of the doubting, but maybe because of, whatever they see, they need to pass certain filters. So for us, let's say as a people who just like interacting with the technology, with the, maybe other cultures, etc. And when we introduce a new concept, what kind of education skills at the base level as the filters would need to have in order to process the information and count the BS, which stands for the bullshit, from the signals?
It's quite impossible to understand how deep is theory or science when you are not in it at least for 5 years. Let me give you several examples. For example, right now it's a new era of artificial intelligence, and for my age, it is already 7th wave of such conditions were on the planet. So each like 10 years, everyone is trying to say, oh, now we have artificial intelligence and it will replace the person. But as author of some artifact system, I know it will never happen. And those so-called large language models, they do not contain any new information. They just take huge amount of text written by different people, and they just remake them in text which look alike, was created by someone who is deep in the team. But if you will go deeper, you will find that this is just hallucination and there are no facts at all. For example, if you will ask some intellect system how Egyptian pyramid were built, you will see some aliens people with huge arms and very height. They build huge stone at once, and it was like creation by another civilization. When you, for example, will ask what was happening with our planet while Atlantida was sinking, you will see a huge storm somewhere in the sea, and all people who know the waves, who know the wind, they will say, come on, there is nonsense. From the point of physics, there are not such events could be on our planet. We have another way of gravitation, and we have not such a fast speed to sink whole country into the ocean, and no one would be saved, and so on. So, for example, if you ask artificial intelligence to build Martian base or Venice base, you will see that everything is very familiar with building on our planet, but it couldn't be so because in outer space we have another gravity. And for example, artificial intelligence should know that with our usual kidneys there are no chance to get to the Mars. We should stay in the space so long journey that our kidney will refuse to work.
Well, then my last question would be how knowing about scientific growth would help to make this world a better place.
You know, it was time when I was on the first or second course of Kyiv Polytechnical Institute, and there were some professors. I liked them a lot. They were quite famous and they were quite clever, and they were saying to me and to my classmates something like this: frequency of 33 megahertz is unachievable for central processor unit because of the speed of the light. But after 2 or 3 months, suddenly I got a computer from Dell and then from Compaq and from other companies, which will work at speed like 40 megahertz. And when I was inviting my professors to see this computer, and they were looking and say, how do you know that it works with such a speed? And at this point, maybe you remember, all of this computer towers were equipped with small indicators, and there were like digit yellow lines which will indicate the speed. And for example, there are also would a button like turbo and unturbo, and it would be like 20 to 40. And they were saying, come on, this is just an indicator. How do you know that this works with such a speed? And then I got a computer from Siemens, and the speed was like 80 megahertz. And at this point, I also invited my professors, and they were so astonished. They were nothing to say. At this point, I understand that sometimes scientific fraud could be not because I'm a fraudster and I want to say lie. Maybe this is because of limitation of my knowledge.
Well, trust but do provide a due diligence, and we review the skill of scientific fraud and how it could be helpful for you. Stay in peace.